Okay, two things at once. It's happening. Jolly good. Well, welcome for the second Tobacco and Vape Forum with FWD. Really, really appreciate you all taking the time to join us as we demystify all things tobacco and vapes. And this week we are going to take a look at vape duty tax and tobacco and vapes bill, and we'll also circle back to illicit trade with Nikki Small from JTI that we discussed during the first meeting, just so that you know that we have not forgotten about that. That is live and the progress that's going on there. But first of all, we're going to hear from Robert Sidebottom, who is the Managing Director at Arcus Compliance Limited, and Philip Glynn, the Commercial Director and Co-founder at Vape Supplier, VSL. And Robert's going to start off with a presentation about the vape duty tax before seamlessly moving into the tobacco and vapes bill. But I have on good authority from Robert that he's very happy for questions throughout. Otherwise, we might move on and a question will be lost and forgotten. So you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll try and do an interrupting job at an appropriate time. But however you feel most happy asking those questions. Oh, we just got a couple more people coming in. Great. Okay, Robert, over to you.
Okay, let's just, is that run up? Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can. Yep, you're in presenter view as well.
That's great, fantastic. So as per the introduction, my name is Robert Sidebottom. I'm the Managing Director at Arcus Compliance. Arcus Compliance is, as the name suggests, is a regulatory compliance agency who do compliance primarily, well, that's actually shifting, but primarily in the nicotine space. We also deal with cosmetics, electronic products, various other bits and bobs that we do. I'm actively engaged, pretty much most of my days taken up with future regulations and regulations that are coming through and understanding them and translating them for clients and putting them in a particular position so that people understand exactly what the impacts are dependent on where they sit in the supply chain. So there's going to be two presentations today, and I'm going to do a bit of tag teaming between me and Phil. So I'll kind of come at this from a compliance agency kind of point of view and try and inform you as wholesalers exactly what impact this has. But at the same time, Phil can kind of come at from a retailer point of view and kind of add that little bit of cream to the top of the presentation, really, that makes you understand exactly what the implications are for you, probably in a more layman's sense. So just to crack on then, so we've got two presentations today. The first presentation that we're going to look at is a wholesaler's operational blueprint for UK vaping products duty and duty stamp schemes, of which I've called Securing the Chain. And the whole premise of this, as the name suggests, it's to kind of like demystify, as Lindsay put it earlier, around this piece of legislation and exactly how this will impact you, and to understand what your obligations are within that. So we'll cover what it means for the supply chain, the strict compliance checkpoints that will need to be implemented. Okay, so the dual objective of this public health and market strategy, and the government's got two main goals, you can see from the slide here. The first is to reduce appeal and affordability of vaping for young people and non-smokers, and the second is to eradicate illicit trade, so feeding in nicely to the second part of this today's forum, by introducing a highly regulated track and trace kind of type ecosystem where liability is enforced at pretty much every stage of the supply chain. Okay, so if you don't know, and I'm sure you all do, and I'm sure you've seen it bandied around in various sort of LinkedIn posts, social media posts, etc., and hopefully this won't be any surprise to you. The new duties are a universal flat rate of £2.20 per 10 ml, so that roughly equates to 22p per mil. However, I would add on to that In true government HMRC fashion, the VAT gets added on top of that. So if we were talking about a 10 ml bottle of £2.20 with excise, with the VAT added on top, that's £2.64. So that 22 pence per mil applies to all vaping liquids, regardless of nicotine content. So that includes nic-free products. If it's vapable, it's getting the tax. The volume dictates the liability, meaning that you must ensure your systems that you have track the precise physical volumes down to 0.1 ml, as mismatches between label claims and actual volume can trigger HMRC investigations. Okay, so to move on then, we'll have a look at the anatomy of a compliant package or stamp. Now, look, it's very worthwhile to point out that this isn't the only way of applying stamps. Stamps may be applied directly to bottles, which are classed as packaging. So a compliant package will feature a physical stamp on the outermost packaging, and from September 2026, a scannable digital matrix code. As wholesalers, you generally operate in step 3 here, which is where the release for consumption is. But that all depends where you sit within that specific chain. So, for example, Phil's company could be releasing those products to you, and they will be duty paid, duty cleared, legally cleared when they are released and sent on to you. So you generally operate in that step 3 of the life cycle, dealing exclusively with the products that's already been released for consumption and had the duty paid. The next slide then, the chain of responsibility. This matrix shows you where you sit in that supply chain, so to speak, and you'll see the responsibilities highlighted on there. And the good news is there's quite a few no's there for you. So while you don't need HMRC premises or approval to pay for the duty directly to HMRC like manufacturers do, you trade that freedom for absolute liability downstream for specific compliance. You're responsible to ensure that you've got rigorous supply due diligence and verifying stamped goods. So you must ensure that the products that you're receiving and therefore putting onto the market are appropriately, that noise wasn't me, by the way, are appropriately stamped, and that you've completed that due diligence for verifying your stamped goods. But if you're working with specific suppliers such as Vape Supplier, for example, I think you can be pretty confident that the products that you'll be getting will be conforming to the rest of the elements on this matrix. So let's move on and look at the sell-through window and some of the key dates. Okay, the sell-through window and transitioning to mandatory stamp notes. Here is the timeline. So you'll see that the duty is introduced from the 1st of October 2026, which is where all new products must carry a stamp. And then we have this clear sell-through window where you can clear older unstamped stock. However, by the 1st of April 2027, this is the hard stop, and it is a particularly hard stop. After that date, every single vaping product outside the duty suspension must have a stamp or it becomes illegal to hold. So what does that mean in practice? So in practice, if we have products which are manufactured or imported before the 1st of October 2026, they're classified by HMRC as non-duty stock. So basically you can put those products into the supply chain, into retailers, and there is no expectation that those products will need to be stamped, nor will they need to pay the duty. However, they cannot remain on the market post the 31st of March 2027, because that hard stop kicks in on the 1st of April 2027. So this means that you will need to negotiate with your supplier so that you plan to ensure that you get the appropriate amount of stock in during that free sale period, and that you have a plan for withdrawing that stock and returning it for reworking to your supplier in good time, because you literally cannot hold that product at all in any shape or form post the 1st of April 2027. Phil, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm aligned with that. And yes, look, after literally March 31st, you're not allowed to hold, anyone in the chain is not allowed to hold any stock that's non-duty paid.
Where does it go?
It comes back to approved premises. So the product can be returned back to approved premises. Those approved premises can be HMRC approved premises. They could be premises which are customs warehouses, excise warehouses, etc. Obviously, you can't bring it back into a customs warehouse, but it's an approved premise where the product can be reworked and declared. So the HMRC is aware of this and have made allowances for that returning back of stock. So they're not getting in a specific twist about the product actually going into duty suspension, but they are being very specific about good record keeping, products coming back from retailers, being recorded appropriately and booked into the approved premises, and then being immediately easily recognizable as those products that are going to be reworked or destroyed.
Just one commercial point just to add there is that obviously there is a fixed cost to reworking the products that come back. So the preference for everyone in the chain is that it doesn't happen and is minimized as much as possible. So therefore, a lot of customers are sort of planning to hold stock, for example, up to January of the non-duty paid, then leaving themselves enough of a buffer to sell through any remnants, because the cost of repacking, and then someone like ourselves will be repacking, but there is a fixed cost to doing so, and then by the time you compare that to buying a new unit, although it will be cheaper, it won't be significantly different. So it's much better to plan assuming that won't happen, but there are plan Bs in place to do so.
Robert, could I ask a question? It might be one for you or one for Philip, or anyone else on the call that can help. Are we going to have a situation between October and the end of March where there are two-tier pricing? So there are some on the market with the duty stamp with the higher price and the inflated VAT, and then some that aren't?
Yeah, absolutely. There will be that situation. There will be duty-free stock during that transition period, which will be on the market. Absolutely. Another operational challenge is that you could have two identical products. Essentially, you could say, have two products supplied, which would be identical, but one would have a tax stamp on it and one wouldn't. One would be, if it was 10 mil, £2.64 more expensive than the other. And the operational sort of challenge is that you're actually going to have two different barcodes as well, so that people can scan these through. So the tax paid product is going to have its own unique barcode, so that when these are being scanned by retailers, they can differentiate between the two. What the expectation is, and this is my view, and I'm sure Phil will have a view on this as well, is that I think that the non-duty paid stock will sell quite quickly. The consumer will soon recognize a product which is duty paid and which isn't duty paid, and is likely to stock up on these products. So I think that we will see a shift in sales during that period where people will decide to stock up. But this is all very dependent as well on the type of retailer. It also depends on whether that retailer, if it's a large multiple, for example, wants to take that kind of risk on of potentially having stock at the end of it that they're going to have to return to the supplier. So it's very variable, and I'm sure Philip will speak a little bit more to that.
Great. Yeah, I wonder if there's an oversell cap as well that government are going to impose, similar to when they upped the duty on tobacco.
The hammer comes down. It's just, from the 1st of April, that product can't be out there anymore.
Okay, but there's nothing against ordering more than you want.
Absolutely not. No, there's nothing against that at all. But you risk having that out in the marketplace, and then breaking the law, and B, having to have it returned. So there has to be a bit of a balancing act about how much pre-October stock you're putting out there in that transition period.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions on this while we're on the sell-through window topic? Silence is golden.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll have a look at supplier
Yeah,
vetting and verification. Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to add that obviously commercially, the customers or the suppliers, should I say, who have the most stock with the non-duty paid price point are going to benefit compared to those that, for example, moved on October the 1st and only sold duty paid stock. And retailers, as we know, will always look for the best deals. So there is a very conscious forecast that each of you need to put together to try and hold the maximum you're comfortable with in order to capitalize on that situation. And I think everyone from retailers up to wholesalers up to distributors like ourselves are all trying to get to the right figure and the right commitment for everyone. So but at the same time not holding substantial amounts such that you're going to be left with significant stock come March 31st. So that's the balancing act, and obviously we can talk to each of you separately offline to discuss that, but that's the major consideration right now.
We've got 2 questions. DC, I'm guessing that's David Cook.
No, it's not. It's Derek Cowan. Derek Cowan for Phil.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Phil, are there any indication when the multiples are actually going to go stamp stock?
Without naming names, I think the consensus at the moment is holding to January, giving yourself February and March to deal with the overstocks. So yeah, quite a lot of them are now forecasting October, November, December with a bit of January, I should say. So I would say that's a fair balance and commitment to make.
Okay, thank you.
Was there another question, Lindsay?
Yes, there is. Chris Hewitt, I think.
Yeah, it's me. Phil, do we know that manufacturers are actually going to have the stock to be able to see us through till January? Because we've been having some major supply issues as it is now. Are they going to be able to ramp up in time before then?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And also, I need to add in, have the approved stamp supplier also got enough stamps to produce the millions of units that are going to be pre-ordered before October? Look, they are all now putting forecasts in, so this is something that needs to happen in the coming weeks, not months, to put orders in to try and get them to land in October, before October, sorry. So, as an example, VSL are doing their own forecast to hold their own stock alongside wholesalers that are committing for their own stock through us as well. So there'll be 2 components to this. You to commit to X stock and then VSL to hold Y stock for the event that you need more, because we're going to be holding similar forecast numbers to what I just mentioned. And therefore you can technically pull through from VSL in October, November, December if we've got the stock. And there's lots of sort of commercial discussions going on about you committing to us and us then committing to the brands to try and get that, and so to get that stock here beforehand. So June will be effectively, from our point of view, that cut-off date to ensure that you've got effectively July and August to manufacture it and factoring in some contingency as well.
Thanks, Phil.
Cool. Any further questions, or should we move on to the next slide?
I don't think there are. Just check the chat. No. Will the deck be shared, says David.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Lovely stuff.
No problem at all. So we'll move on to the next slide now, which is about rigorous supplier vetting and verifications. Okay, the 4 eyes check. So here we are. Your first compliance pillar is vetting and verification. You've got to document due diligence on all your suppliers and ensure that inbound goods undergo a 4 eyes check to verify physical volumes and untampered stamps. So, you know, in the early days of this, it's very important. But as we get used to this and the stamps start being applied, the visual check is quite important to make sure that these things are applied appropriately. The last thing you want is stamps not being applied properly, or peeling off, or being in the wrong the fold being in the wrong place, etc. And I think that that is a critical element for you to ensure that these products are stamped correctly and verified correctly, and that's your responsibility. The importance of this can't be underestimated, because if products aren't stamped correctly, it can result in HMRC action. I suspect that they'll have a slightly softer touch in the very early days, but I think that, you know, it's critically important that as we get used to this, that these products are all stamped appropriately, and that your responsibility within this is key to make sure that's done, to do a visual check on that. If goods arrived unstamped or from unverified sources, for example, they must go into quarantine protocols immediately. So that's really important that you're on top of that. Okay. Let's have a look at threat isolation. The 6-year audit trail. So this is pretty much a standard of keeping records, which has been recognised by HMRC. So your second pillar is record keeping. You're required to maintain complete exportable audit trail for 6 years. This includes purchasing and sales data, retailing to specific SKUs, net volume, stamp verification logs, and documentation proving your staff are trained to spot counterfeits. So there is going to be some more information provided about the stamps from the stamp supplier, and there'll be some more detail to follow on that and what your responsibilities are for that. I don't expect that to be particularly onerous. I think it's something that'll be reasonably easy to do. If we look at pillar 3, threat isolation and incident auditing, then you must establish a physical quarantine zone in your warehouse for unverified or suspected counterfeit stock. You must completely segregate from your legitimate inventory. You also need to conduct constant inventory reconciliations and maintain a permanent log of any incidents or seizures, because we are dealing with an excisable product. You know, everything shifted because of this excisable product. The contagion risk. So understanding the penalties in the ecosystem, the reason threat isolation is so crucial in the contagion risk is if unstamped or counterfeit goods are found in your possession after April 2027, HMRC has the power to seize your legitimate stamped stock alongside the illegal goods. So it's pretty important, I think, that you have a process in place for actually putting stuff to one side and making sure that it's appropriately marked and that it can be identified easily, because ignorance of supplier fraud is not a defence. In law, unfortunately, ignorance is no exemption from criminal liability. So you must ensure that you've got these practices in place. Let's have a look at the wholesale compliance shield. If you think of your operations as a compliance shield, we like that term at Arcus Compliance, made of 3 interconnected gears, vetting your perimeter, recording your legal armour, and auditing it as an internal immune system. A failure in just one of these gears can expose your entire inventory to seizure. So it's critical that you look at those 3 specific areas. I don't see this as particularly onerous. This is practical, standard operating procedure steps that you should take, like maintaining your paper trail, isolating and reporting anomalies, and reporting, stopping illicit goods and reporting them if they enter into your premises. So it's all reasonable stuff. Pretty much most of this can be written into a policy paper, and with limited training, you can make sure that that's passed across to all your staff and they understand exactly what they've got to do. I'd like to say there was a package I could sell you for that, but it's too simple to do. Actually, it's reasonably easy to put in place. Okay, so the transition blueprint then. So what are the next steps for wholesalers? So to prepare, here is your transition blueprint. You start your supply chain audit now. So who's supplying you product? You terminate any relationships with suppliers who cannot guarantee properly stamped stock. By summer 2026, upgrade your inventory management systems to track stamp presence, record the exact volumes of exactly what you're ordering. And finally, before October 2026, you build your physical quarantine zones and train your receiving staff. And that's pretty much it for your responsibilities. Are there any questions with regards to the presentation so far, or what your responsibilities are? It's all gone very quiet.
It has. You stunned everybody into silence.
Yeah, so these are pretty standard stuff. If you've ever dealt with alcohol and cigarettes or any other excisable goods, you'll be very used to this type of procedure for managing products as they come in. Okay, so Lindsay, should we move on to the next presentation and talk about that?
That would be great. Thank you. If anyone thinks of a question, you can ask it whenever you like or stick it in the chat.
You have to give me a minute to talk amongst yourselves while I find the next one.
Fine. I certainly think you're both right, you and Philip, about the balance of ordering and holding stock, isn't it? It's like going to be like a game of poker.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a bit like a game of poker. It's the unknowns of this, unfortunately. It's trying to forecast what consumer behavior is going to be like. It's quite difficult, and how to manage that. So, you know, there's a lot of this is a first for everybody. Do you know what I mean? You know, we've not had a brand new excisable product since I think it's 1979. So, you know, dealing with this, and HMRC are also, a certain proportion of HMRC are learning this as they write their own policies and procedures, and they examine excisable products that they've done before and how these sit within there. So there's a certain amount of learning going on. And they, to be fair, you know, of all the government organisations that I've worked with and supported and meetings with, etc., HMRC are probably the most open-minded. Obviously, there's some red stops. They're not changing the level of tax. But actually, in terms of the way this is being delivered, they've already made some changes and movements based on feedback from stakeholders. So I have to say they have been very, very good.
Mm.
Yeah, I've got a question actually, Robert. How much is the government forecasting to generate through this duty application?
Well, there's a question, David. So yeah. The forecast is £400 to £500 million, which, quite frankly, is the most ridiculous forecast I've ever seen in my life. I've got one single client who we did the forecasting on that, and they're going to be paying that themselves. So I think they are a considerable way off on the forecasting. Now, that leads into two things for me, David, and that leads into, first of all, I worry if that was their forecast, then they must have had an idea on what they were going to provision for stamps based on that forecast. And when I consider that forecast and how far off it is, I worry about the stamp supply. And I've made that clear to the HMRC representatives that I do worry about the stamp.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all.
It's a mile off. It's an absolute mile off. So I do worry about the stamp supplies. They've assured me that they think that the stamp supply can keep up with this. But look, I don't want to worry or panic or upset anybody, or, you know, this is my view. This is not Arcus Compliance's view. I'm pretty happy to bet a Kit Kat that I think that something's going to change. Something's going to move, whether the date's going to move slightly. Something's got to give, because I'm not particularly confident that these stamps can be produced in the numbers that are going to be required. I don't think they've really had a handle on that at all. But let's see. I hope it does. And at the end of the day as well, there is a provision. The government have to ensure that businesses can operate and make profit. You know, that's a legal position for them. They can't suddenly sort of handcuff people because of their own lack of preparation. So I don't think, if they can't supply the correct amount of stamps, I don't think that's going to hold up businesses. I think that what we'll see is a movement on the transition period, for example. So let's just see.
I was expecting to be like 2 billion.
It's a ridiculous number. As I say,
it's so wild. Yeah,
it's crazy. But let's see how it pans out. Listen, I know they are moving at pace, absolutely moving at pace. I have regular communications with them. We do a lot of work on the stakeholder group with them, and I know for a fact they're moving at pace. And we have hundreds of applications that have gone in for approved premises from suppliers at the moment of varying degrees of quality, and we're waiting for the first ones to come through. I'm expecting one of our clients to get it this week. I'm expecting another one of our clients next week. So we'll start to see these coming through slowly but surely. But the stamp supply is the thing that I'm worried about.
Okay, got it. Well, Nikki says that, the government have under forecasted the lost duty through the illegal trade by half. That's 2 billion up to 4 billion.
Absolutely, they have. Yeah, absolutely.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, this is the part of the thing which we'll go on to later on. I think today is about when we have the illicit discussion. How do you actually put a pin in how big the illicit trade is? It's impossible. The whole point of it being illegal is it becomes impossible to measure, because therefore by virtue of itself it is impossible to measure because it's illegal. So you can't really get a true handle on it. So forecasting on those particular things is particularly difficult. But yeah, okay. Well, I think we'll probably have a further conversation later on. I think so. Let's get this one up and running.
Great.
Okay, so is that on the screen? I'll just put it in presenter mode.
You are there. Yep. That's it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the Tobacco and Vapes Act. Now, there's a couple of things I need to point out with regards to the Tobacco and Vapes Act, and then there's a couple of assumptions that I'm not entirely, can't remember if I put these assumptions in here, but some of the dates, so some of the commencements for various elements of the Tobacco and Vapes Act require a statutory instrument with commencement dates put to them. So there are some elements within the Tobacco and Vapes Act that are pretty solid and tied down, and there are some elements that need a statutory instrument with commencement dates to do it. So what I've done in this presentation is we've taken Northern Ireland, good old Northern Ireland, has jumped the gun a little bit and have actually issued commencement dates. Now, my assumption is, and based on previous regulation, etc., is that we fully expect those Northern Ireland dates to be actually correct. The Department of Health, for example, issued a social media thing about 2 weeks ago, basically talking about the advertising ban being the 1st of June. So I'm pretty confident that it's going to be around the 1st of June, even though they haven't actually released it in the statutory instrument yet. So we are waiting for
1st of June 2027.
2027. Don't panic. 2027. So there are some of those assumptions within here. So what I'm going to present here then is a wholesale blueprint for navigating the Tobacco and Vapes Act. The session's going to outline how we manage the trade exemptions, ensure operational compliance, protect against corporate liability across the entire distribution network, and crucially, as highlighted on the screen, this strategy is strictly anchored to the Northern Ireland commencement dates. Okay, so let's have a look at the NI datum of which we're making the assumptions from, of which, as I've said, I'm pretty confident it's going to be. So to ensure operational readiness, we're adopting these Northern Ireland timelines as our master datum, providing us with the most definitive and conservative chronological roadmap. We're going to be looking at 3 critical horizons. So the 29th of October 2026 for enforcement of free distribution and discounting bans, alongside vaping sales restrictions to under 18s. 1st of January 2027 for the generational tobacco age of sale ban and point of sale notices, and 1st of June 2027 for the activation of Part 6, which is the advertising prohibitions and stringent sponsorship offences. And we'll look at these specific liabilities. Now, look, I think it's important to point out as well as we go through this that there has been kind of like messages back from government that they're going to have a consultation on the advertising ban. But I mean, what I find quite difficult is that the advertising stuff is pretty much hardwired into the Tobacco and Vapes Act. So I'm not entirely sure why they're consulting on it. But look, if they want to talk, and if we can make any movement at all on it, and there are some changes that can be made, then great. What we will desperately need as we approach the 1st of June 2027 next year will be ASA/CAP guidance, so that we understand all the elements specifically of how that's being interpreted by enforcement, to understand exactly what we can and we can't do. Because on the face of it, when you look at that particular advertising ban, it's pretty dire. It's like, you know, tobacco. It's a pretty dire ban. Okay, so let's have a look at isolating the wholesaler's liability. So the middle tier of this is isolating the wholesaler's liability. And as the middle tier between manufacturers and retailers, the liability profile is unique. While manufacturers face Part 5 packaging and ingredient requirements, and retailers handle Part 1 to 3 of premises licensing, the wholesale network faces 4 key exposure vectors, and these are trade marketing, business-to-business sponsorship agreements under Section 131, promotional dissemination and printing under Sections 118 and 123, and inventory holding and seizure risks under Part 4. And finally, corporate governance liability under Sections 134. So let's have a look at these. So free distribution and discounting. Our first major deadline is the 29th of October 2026. So under Section 15 and Section 84, and sorry for quoting these sections, it becomes a criminal offence to give away or sell products at a substantial discount to the public, or distribute redeemable coupons to promote them. So please note the broad scope warning on this slide. This is a total cessation of business to consumer free sampling and deep discounting, and it applies not just to vapes, but to tobacco products, herbal smoking products, cigarette papers, and all nicotine products across the inventory. What I mean by all nicotine products is nicotine pouches. Now, we are expecting some further guidance on this so that we can understand exactly what is deemed to be, for example, discounting it too much. You know, what can you get away with? Because clearly we should be able to discount in some shape or form, but we need some clear guidance on how deep discounting is viewed.
I guess if I ask a question like Robert, Lindsay, or even Phil, you know, because there's going to be a conflict here. There's going to be a load of wholesalers and retailers stocking up on non-duty paid products because they've still got the window to clear. But then it's going to take them to that window in January or February, March next year, where they need to clear it. But how the hell are they going to clear it without a published definition of what substantial means?
I don't disagree with you.
It's crazy.
You know,
Robert, could I just say something there? What you just read out was a consumer substantial discount, not B2B.
Yes,
what do you understand?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, consumer substantial discount. Yeah.
So wholesalers can still discount to their customers, to their retail customers, right?
Yeah.
Well, I guess either way, if one of our wholesalers has to deep discount to clear it, they're only going to sell it to the retailers. But if the retailers overstock themselves, then they can't then discount themselves to clear it. So it log jams the whole system. Yeah,
I don't really have a comment on that. I'm just pretty much quoting exactly where we are from the tobacco and vapes bill. It's just that's exactly where we are with it. Whether or not there's any movement on that, doubtful. But this is where it sits at this moment in time. So should we move to 1st of June, Horizon looking at the 1st of June horizon and Part 6 advertising prohibitions if you really want to depress yourself? Okay.
Let's go for it.
So the 1st of June 2027 horizon, so Part 6 of the advertising prohibition. So looking further ahead to that date, the Act criminalises the entire life cycle of promotional material if done in the course of business. This includes publishing under Section 118, creative design under 119, physical printing of POS material under 120, physical distribution of these materials through the network under Section 121, and furthermore, strict liability for sponsorship agreements under Section 131 means we must conduct, which means you must conduct a legal audit of any sort of active trade marketing agreements that you've got going on, particularly with this sponsorship agreement. So it's listen, I can't flower this up in any shape or form. The advertising ban from the 1st of June is particularly dire reading. It makes a significant impact, this advertising ban, which is primarily focused on business to consumer. Business to business, there is some safe harbors with that, which I'll move on to in a moment. But if you just think about tobacco as it currently is in advertising and apply that pretty much to vape products, nicotine products, then you're not going to be a million miles off. So no promotional material, no mats, anything like that. So the dichotomy, the difficulty with this at the moment is the way that it is described, i.e. The difference between, for example, putting a POS, point of sale stand on a countertop and positioning that in such a way that it won't be deemed as advertising and promoting the product. I find that a very difficult position, and I await for the ASA's guidance, because I would love to see how they prescribe that, because at no point at this point, I should say, are we talking about, putting these things behind shutters like tobacco. We are still have them out on sort of open display. And there will be some future consultations about that, but how they skin that particular cat is going to be particularly difficult. So yeah, just kind of watch for this. If you don't subscribe to my sort of LinkedIn or follow me on LinkedIn, I suggest you do. As this evolves, I'll be putting various updates on it so that we can add some more detail to it and more further understanding. But from my perspective now, I think what will be needed for this before the 1st of June will be very strict guidelines and information, or very detailed, guidelines and information from the ASA, so that we understand exactly what we can and can't do with this advertising restriction. Let's just talk about the safe harbour then, which is Section 125, trade to trade defence. So while those advertising prohibitions are undoubtedly sweeping, Section 125 provides a vital safe harbour for our wholesale operations. So public-facing B2C communications are unprotected and criminalised. However, B2B communications are protected if they meet the 3 strict criteria. They must be made in the course of trade, exclusively for the purpose of that trade, and directly solely relevant purchasing person, directly solely to relevant purchasing personnel or senior management. We must ensure that our trade pricing lists, wholesale reps communications, B2B portals are strictly gated from the general public. It's interesting because some of this isn't new actually to the vaping industry. We've already been restricted in some senses for certain points of advertising. So, for example, trade magazines, you were never allowed to create a magazine, for example, about vaping and publish that and give that to consumers. That was always a B2B practice. So that it's not entirely new, but these B2B safe harbours must be strictly stuck to. Okay. Does everybody get any questions, or would Phil like to add anything to this thoroughly depressing conversation?
No, so really, one question I've got, Rob, is about can brands activate inside a depot like they do now, because it's not to consumers? Can they do it B2B?
Yes. Yeah. So directly and solely at the relevant purchasing personnel or senior management. Absolutely. Yeah. Made in the course of the trade, exclusive for the purpose of that trade, and directly solely at the relevant purchasing personnel and senior management. So yes, that's fine.
So for the purposes of the audience, it's nothing changes from where they are today.
Yeah, B2B.
Okay.
Robert, it's Colin. I might
Hi,
have ducked
Colin.
out, so apologies if you're repeating yourself, but I suppose one of the main areas of focus at the moment, particularly in B2C, is around the presence of some vape gantries now, in some cases in place of tobacco gantries. Now, these gantries also include screens, and in most cases are involving, not exclusively, but media relating to the products that are then below them. I'm presuming that is covered by the previous slide that you just touched on.
That's advertising.
Yeah, I thought so. I just wanted to clear that up. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, look, let's be clear. You're allowed to present your product. At this point in time, and whilst we're just talking about the tobacco and vapes bill, the tobacco and vapes bill essentially gives the Secretary of State complete sweeping powers to make change in this particular sector. So we have the changes which are already embedded within the bill, as we've discussed here about advertising, etc., and how they're going to be put in place. But there are powers for the Secretary of State to do other things. So if they wanted to, for example, move to plain packaging, put products behind shutters, restrict flavors, they could essentially do that without consultation. However, the Secretary of State and the government have committed to that any other future changes will be subject to consultation. Now, look, let me just put a position to you. We had a discussion earlier about the gross underestimation of the tax that's going to be generated by these products. I would say a couple of things. If you think that the government is likely to ban flavors, put products into plain packaging and move them behind shutters, when they actually qualify and look at the amount of tax that they will generate, I think that's highly unlikely to happen. I think that they will be generating a significant amount of tax through these products, and I think it highly unlikely that they would like to hamstring themselves and reduce that tax that they're going to generate by putting too onerous changes on these products, such as flavour bans and plain packaging and moving them behind shutters. I think,
Robert, I don't think you can say that on the basis of look what they did with the national insurance contributions, which was actually killed business. I mean, that's economically illiterate as well. So I don't think you can apply the common sense lens to this.
Well, I like to apply common sense lens. That's just my personal view, and I'm hoping, hope of all hopes, that would be the position they would take. But I don't want to be complete doom and gloom, because I think that essentially what we have is a life-changing product. Phil knows this, I can stand on my soapbox for a long time about this. We have a life-changing product that makes a significant difference to former smokers and changes lives, saves lives. And I think that we need to be, very sure about that on this particular product moving forward. It is, in terms of a risk profile compared to cigarettes, it's minuscule. Absolutely minuscule in terms of a risk profile. It's not just the tax at that end as well. It's the saving of the money that in the NHS, for example. So the NHS, it saves them considerable amount of money. You reduce, I think it's 164,000 pounds, I think was the average spend on, might have been actually far more than that, for somebody who suffers from cancer or a smoking related illness. I think it was actually far more than that. It does have a definite benefit. It was interesting as well, because I started up a thing called the Vape Protection Alliance when we were looking at potential flavour bans, and the Casey that we were discussing this with was very clear that he thought there was a very strong position for a judicial review should the government decide to ban flavours, because of the profile of this particular product and the fact that it has a positive effect on the health of former smokers. So I don't think it's all bad news, but look, change is nothing new in this particular sector, as Phil and all of you here who have been involved in vaping will be used to. It's just something I think that we've got to roll with for the time being and fight the good fight where we possibly can. Shall I get back to the presentation?
Please do, because I'm conscious we're tight for time.
Okay. So I think we got through this one, didn't we? Yeah, about exclusively for the purpose of that trade, in the course of the trade, and directly and solely for the relevant purchase of personnel and senior management. So let's have a look at a specific product which creates an inventory risk, and this is the snus ban. Now, snus has been banned previously, but I think they've reiterated this within the bill very clearly. We must also address our physical inventory. So Part 4 introduces robust interception and detention mechanics for illicit products. There's a ban on the manufacture, sale and possession of supply of snus, meaning we must audit and clear all matching oral tobacco inventory before the 29th of October 2026. Additionally, HMRC officers possess the power under Section 92 to seize and detain suspected illicit snus and filters for up to 48 hours to facilitate enforcement, which requires strict compartmentalisation and are compliant versus quarantine stock. Okay. Downstream impact from the 1st of January. Smoking. So on the 1st of January, the retail landscape changes fundamentally with the generational shift. I won't even go on about this because we could talk about this for a long time. I think it's ridiculous, but let's go on. So the landscape changes fundamentally with the generational shift. Illegal to sell tobacco products to anyone born on or after the 1st of January 2009. While primarily a retail restriction, it alters our supply logic. We must ensure that retailers we supply with POS are provided with legally required age of sale notices, and we must also strictly enforce the prohibition of the sale of unpackaged cigarettes in our break build operations, ensuring units are fully sealed before dispatch and prepare for volume spikes driven by local proxy purchasing crackdowns. Okay. Only a few more slides to go. 134, piercing the corporate veil. This is about liability. Essentially, what's happening with this, to paraphrase this, is that the individual becomes liable. It's no longer you have this kind of corporate protection within your business. If you're deemed to have been involved, then you are individually liable. So the legal standard is outright reasonably to have known. Ignorance of supply chain promotional activities or illicit inventory is explicitly removed as a defence. And then the final slide is the 90-day wholesaler action plan. So we've got this action plan across 3 pillars: legal governance, audit all active sponsorships against Section 131, standards, document our Section 125 defence by implementing formal access gating for our B2B portals. In the supply chain, we need to conduct a snus audit, make sure we haven't got any snus. And finally, in trade marketing, immediately halt all B2C sampling and redesign your retail display units to prepare for the 2027 generational ban notices. Have we got any time left?
You do. What we will do, because we're recording it, we will carry on. And then it will all be recorded. Anyone that can stay on the call, please do past 3 o'clock. And we can send out the recording and a summary. So yeah, carry on, because I think it's really important everyone gets the benefit of your analysis on such an important topic.
Well, we're at the end of the presentation. So any further questions?
Everyone's yes.
Okay, I just wanted to add before we go, of course, there's been a lot of concern with this advertising ban and the fact that it's obviously now a criminal offence to break that legislation and break the law. And on the back of that, I suppose the one ray of light in all of this is that we are all hoping as wholesalers that this will have a significant impact on the cash market sales and the ability for them to continue doing what they've been doing over the last 5 years. And I'm not saying that it will go away, but I think it will significantly reduce their ability to find the loopholes that they've been getting away with to this date. And on top of that, it's obviously now a criminal offence, whereas before it was simply fines and raps over the knuckles. So we are expecting an uptake in revenue generally through people moving from buying from those wholesalers to what we call white wholesalers like yourselves. So there is a bit of positivity there. In terms of product mixes and where to focus, obviously the duty, just to re-emphasize, doesn't fall onto nicotine pouches, so there will likely be an uptake in that as well over after October, because from a consumer's point of view, it will become the most affordable way to consume nicotine. So there should be a focus for you to on that category more so. In terms of product mix as well, obviously we don't know until the trends start happening, but we don't anticipate a huge movement away from big puffs. We believe that the price difference moving from £12.99 to what will end up being £16.99 will still give the consumer significant value over a 2ml. It will just come down to cash out of pocket, and effectively, a 2ml product will move from £5-6 to £7-8, where so consumers might try 2mls initially and see if they can get on with those better than they did before, but there will probably be a movement back towards the big puffs, and we don't see a huge dent in that really. So really, in conclusion, I would keep the product mixes very similar to what you've got at the moment. Obviously, manufacturers will now, and retailers themselves will now start focusing on a more condensed range to stock when it comes to flavour profiles and the number of SKUs listed per brand. So it will end up being the best sellers rather than the best sellers plus the tail. And I think every retailer, because of the price increase, will then have to start thinking about reformatting their range, and that will obviously apply in wholesale as well. So it will end up being probably the same number of brands, but it will be less SKUs per brand. So because of the investment required to sustain where we are today. Has anyone got any questions on that before we drop off on that point?
No.
Okay. So look, obviously we can take any questions offline and have one-to-ones, because it will obviously require some very, very diligent forecasting to make sure that we are optimizing the next 6 months ahead of us. So we're here to help. Great.
Thank you ever so much, Philip, and thank you, Robert, for putting that presentation together and the slides. And as you said at the beginning, we'll be sharing those out along with the recording. So thank you for that. It's a lot of food for thought, that's for sure, and a lot coming down the line. Right. Very briefly, I'm going to hand over to Nikki Small, Director of Corporate Affairs and Communications at JTI. And if you remember, during our first session of the Tobacco and Vapes Forum, Nikki played a starring role in explaining the illicit trade and how we plan on tackling it. And we came up with ideas and we debated them and so on. Nikki, you've got an update for us on where we are with that.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I'll just chat through, in the interest of time, take a few minutes just to sort of bring you up to speed on what we're seeing from a political and law enforcement perspective around the illicit trade. So to start with, I'm afraid I don't come with good news to say the illicit trade has just dropped off over the last couple of months, but we are moving forward with it. I think to pick up on something that Robert talked about earlier is that the estimate of how big the illicit trade is and the underestimate from HMRC. So you talked about potential ways of measuring that, and we do have a couple of measures that we use at JTI that I just wanted to touch on because they may be useful for vape in the future. So the first one we do is like an empty pack survey. So that's run in conjunction with the other manufacturers in the UK as well. And we go to many different locations around the UK and we do what it says on the tin. We pick up we have an agency that does it. They pick up the empty packs and we can take from the empty packs. We then, each of the manufacturers looks at the packs and identifies whether they are brought from overseas, whether they are counterfeit or whether they're genuine. And from that, we can get a read on what is being consumed in the UK. So we have one read from that. Another survey that we undertake as JTI is we have what we call a pack swap survey. So we go out into the street and we talk to consumers who are smoking, and we talk about their pack. We ask them where they bought it from, and then we ask to do a pack swap with them. So we'll give them like a plain unbranded pack, and we'll take their pack away again for analysis. Now, the two surveys do give different results. You have different variations depending on which areas you go into from an EPS survey. And obviously a lot of the pack swap survey depends on whether the people you're talking to are obviously telling you the truth about where you buy your product from. But both of those surveys give significantly higher results than HMRC does. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but there are ways that could potentially be looked at in the future for vape products on how to estimate where illicit trade is at once the duties come into force. So those surveys give us a range of illicit trade at around 50% at the moment, whereas HMRC would say somewhere around 20% broadly on tobacco. So where are we? So as you know, JTI has been running its own campaign. It costs more than you think. The campaign has been running at pace this year. So we are doing lots of hyper-local campaigns across the country. We've run 6 so far this year. We've done Birmingham, Leeds, Grimsby, Romford, Ashfield and Bolton. We've had very good traction in all those places. We'll be doing out-of-home, digital advertising, targeted advertising, and regional media as well. While we're there, we have set a web page up on each of the locations on our microsite, the It Costs More Than You Think microsite, where we've put all the results from our test purchasing in the area, the traction that we've seen, the statistics on how many people have visited our site, how many downloads there have been, and all of that. So really good visibility so far. We've had nearly 50 million digital impressions in the first 4 months, and to compare that to, it was 56 in, I think it was 8 months in 2025. So a real uptick this year. In terms of other events that we're doing to coincide with these regional events, we've also started a programme of doing some roundtable events. So we've held one in Birmingham with retailers to get them along to talk about, what they're seeing in the local area, what more needs to happen there, and how we can support that. And I'm pleased to say we're working with FWD to arrange one with wholesalers as well. So that will be coming soon. In terms of broader pickup, so you'll have seen from a media perspective that people like the BBC and the Independent have done more exposés into the illicit trade on high streets, not just talking about tobacco and vapes, but wider as well, which is really continuing to drive that narrative. And we're really starting to see some shift from a political perspective as well. So just a couple of things to highlight here. One of the main ones was, I'm sure you all saw about it in the Crime and Policing Act that went through just before Parliament was prorogued. There was, amongst the shoplifting offences as well, there was an amendment to increase the maximum duration of shop closure orders. And that's a really important tool that law enforcement use to be able to shut down illicit trade. So the amendment doesn't define the amount a closure order could be extended to, but they're going to consult on it, and we would like to see that at least extended to 6 months. I know the original amendment that was put down was for 12 months, but I think that was viewed as too much. But from 3 to 6 months is really important, because under the current closure order process, a closure order can be issued for up to 3 months. It can be extended, but the administrative burden of trying to extend it up to 6 months is so high that it never actually gets done. So increasing that initial closure order is really, really important. So some really good news there. You'll also have seen the establishment of a new cross-departmental high streets illegality task force to disrupt criminality and money laundering on the high streets. Really, really good. Crime Stoppers have been appointed in the UK to deliver a 10-week national campaign aimed at changing the public perception of illicit tobacco. And you may have seen as well that Wes Streeting actually announced that a licensing scheme will come along with fines of up to £2,500, and that will be for tobacco and vapes. And that's one of the, as Lindsay mentioned earlier, one of our main calls to action that we would like people to support on is this principle of the on-the-spot fines and being able to penalise businesses more. Now, looking at the extension of closure orders, it could be that the two could be combined together. Could we, for example, call for a fine to be paid before a closure order can be lifted, so that there's like a double penalty for a business, and that brings in that revenue for trading standards to be able to reinvest into their own resources. So there's some really important traction happening from a political level that really lends into what we're calling for as well, in terms of those on-the-spot fines, funding of trading standards, and that ability to have more enforcement on our high streets and shut down that illicit trade. In terms of law enforcement, we're also seeing them crying out for stronger enforcement as well. So we've had the CTSI have come out and actually said one of the main things they want to see happening is a public awareness scheme, which is exactly what our campaign is aimed towards, and re-educating consumers that illicit trade isn't a victimless crime, and that it does have a wider impact, and that isn't linked into organised crime groups, and that we do need to take action to crack down on that. So hopefully our campaign and others joining that will really support in that area as well. So that's really it. It's a very short run through from me. I had a couple of slides, but I just wanted to keep it really succinct for the end of this. But I think the campaign that we're running, this on the spot fine campaign, could provide a really important tool to tackle illegal trade. Now, our campaign as JTI is very much focused on tobacco, but once the vape duty comes in, it will naturally extend into vapes as well. And when we're looking at these £10,000 on the spot fine, which can be connected to or not to a licensing scheme, it could run together or independently, we're very much looking at that as a whole nicotine category. So that was a very short run through, Lindsay. Did you want to add anything from an FWD perspective?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And we are working together, aren't we, on a way to be able to gather signatories on an open letter calling for that on the spot fine. And we're just discussing and kind of exploring how best to do that. And we'll hopefully have an update for you soon between meetings, I would have thought. So that's great. Thank you, Nikki, for going over all of the activity that is sort of fighting the illicit trade from different corners. It's a real pincer movement, isn't it? Rather than
exactly.
It's not going to be one solution. Okay, thank you very much for that. And we will make sure that we update on that at each of these forums as well. Great. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody? No. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, and thank you, Robert, and to Philip as well for your time and for preparing and the slide deck and your wisdom and knowledge and sharing it all here. Really, really grateful for you for doing that. We've got the slide. Actually, I don't have your slide deck, Robert. So if you'd like to send it over to me, I can distribute it when I send out a copy of this meeting.
No problem.
All right.
Thanks for organising, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you for saying wisdom, by the way.
Well,
not sure about
that. You're very wise. There we are. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you for coming along.
Cheers,
everybody. Thank you. Bye now. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.